Happy Thursday, everybody. My name's Aaron Conant. I'm the co-founder, managing director here at BWG Connect. We're a giant networking, knowledge-sharing group. Kicked this off just around 8 years ago. I was on the brand side, struggling to have great conversations with other brands to pick their brain on the biggest topics that everybody was trying to solve for. Network, knowledge share across the board, and also help with partner selection. Kick this group off. I spend the majority of my time talking with brands. I try to hit 20 to 30 a week to stay on top of those trends. And that's where we get the ideas for the webinars that we do, also the dinners, the full day events. If you're in a key tier one city that's out there, you're going to a major e-commerce trade show, let us know. We're probably putting on a dinner or an event there. Would love to meet everybody in person. So out of those conversations, a lot of conversation right now around insights, around shared insights, ratings, reviews, all that fun stuff. And we've got some great friends, partners, supporters of the network for a long time now over at Yogi, and Heike is here today to kind of walk us through some of what they're seeing across the board. Couple housekeeping items. We kick this off about 3 to 4 minutes after the hour, and we're going to wrap up before 2:30 Eastern time as well. So if you're looking at your watch, you're going to know you're going to have plenty of time to get on your next meeting without being late. The other note, which I'd mentioned just a little bit in the pre-call here, was we want it to be as educational and informational as possible. At any point in time, if you have a question, please drop it in the chat or the Q&A. We'll work it in the conversation and we'll get it answered as real time as possible. So with that, today we're in a chat from siloed insights to shared action. Heike, I'm going to kick it over to you. Do you want to do a brief intro on yourself and Yogi? That would be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the deck here. Sound good?
Yes, sounds good. Happy to. And to kick everybody off, I'm actually going to tell you a very simple secret today. And the secret is there's a lot of customer feedback out there, and it's shockingly broad, it's shockingly deep. And if you aggregate it, you can truly inform your product innovation roadmap, your brand sentiment, and even your messaging. So that's what I'm here to tell you. So who am I? I'm Chief Product Officer at Yogi. What we do at Yogi, we work with the large brands. We work with Nestle, Microsoft, Unilever to essentially, first of all, find all of the unstructured consumer feedback that's out there, from reviews and ratings to the email to the CEO to the consumer care call to social media, whatnot, and turn this unstructured feedback into structured insights with actually zero work on the side of our clients. So what our clients have is an application, a web application where they can go in on a daily basis and see how many new feedback records they got, if any new issues are spiking, if any competitors taking off from a brand sentiment, and so on. What I wanted to cover with all of you today is I want to go with you through the different data sources so you get a good understanding of what each data source strengths and biases, but also weaknesses and blind spots are. I want to show you how to unify the insights from the different sources and how brands are using AI to turn all of that into meaningful understanding of the consumer and their needs. And we'll end that with some real use cases. So this is not just a theoretical exercise of what could have been. No, you will see some real examples of how consumers and brands have turned that into actions. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, just a reminder, had a couple more people join. Drop questions in or chat or in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get them answered. Awesome.
Awesome. All right, good. So let's get us all grounded. But honestly, I've seen who of you here, you probably know this one better than I do. You probably feel it. And that is that it's actually really hard to understand what's going on in the market. So first of all, every 17 minutes, a new consumer product is being launched. Now, interestingly, only 10 to 15% of those products are still around 2 years later, which means there's this innovation frenzy, but not every product actually sticks. And that is probably correlated to the fact that also the consumer demand is constantly changing, right? If you look at the hydration space, currently electrolyte is a big thing. Everybody's talking about it. On the shampoo area, suddenly vegetable ingredients in the shampoo is a trend coming up. 8 out of 10 executives, according to Deloitte, say that understanding the changing demands of consumer is one of their biggest challenges. Now, to make that even more complicated, if you even try to understand your consumer, they are all over the place. They have a preference of where they're leaving feedback. So take Gen Zs, for example, they prefer social media as a way to give feedback or mention their likes and dislikes for brands and products. Baby boomers instead prefer a phone call. So you need to understand who is leaving their feedback where in order for you to understand your full customer base. Now, what I want to do is like go in a structured way through the different data sources, and we'll discuss each of them in detail. But maybe first of all, to ground everybody, when we talk about free consumer feedback, what do we mean? So first of all, and I assume most of you are quite familiar with that, there's the ratings and reviews, right? They are on Amazon, they're on Sephora, they're on Best Buy. There's 500 plus retailers out there worldwide, all collecting their own, often proprietary reviews. You can also have aggregators such as Bizarre Voice, Yotpo, bringing it all to you right away. But even in App Store, you see the icons on the bottom. In App Store from Google Play or Apple is often rich product feedback. So, for example, you might have an electric toothbrush and an app associated with it. If you read the reviews from the app, you will still find product relevant feedback. There's consumer care data, and I'm sure many of you have a solution such as Zendesk or Salesforce Service Cloud, gladly, you name it. And often the purpose is to help address the questions consumers have. But if you listen to those calls in detail or read an email, you will find there's often really rich context in addition to the issue that a consumer tried to address. Then there's social media, right? There's many aggregators out there, such as Sprout Social, Meltwater, Talkworker, you name it, but also the social media networks itself, often very rich in feedback, more on a brand level. And then there is the proprietary research, take your call tracks. And often, like those research, this research has been kicked off for a particular question. But what we realized, if you almost take a second look, there is a lot of insight in what exactly a consumer was saying about a situation, how they expressed their sentiment for a brand. So what we realized, taking a secondary look of proprietary research data can often lead to deeper insights.
Really quick, how many people that you are interacting with today, when you first engage, are using all four of these? Because I think overwhelmingly, just in the conversation I'm having, it's a heavy reliance on ratings and reviews, right?
That
Um,
is that is true, and I would say the ratings crew is probably it's also how Yogi started. But what we have realized, especially over the last 2 years, is the drive for consumers, for our clients coming to us and telling us they have more data they want to understand more broadly. So what we have seen now, I'd say at least 40% of our customers have more than just ratings and reviews.
no, awesome. And then what about Google? Erica drops a question in here.
For Google Business Reviews, yeah,
Yeah,
that can also be a really interesting source. Often we see that more for businesses, right? Like for a local shop or something, but also you will also find interesting brand or product reflection at times.
it's
Agreed.
awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. And good question, Aaron, of the different type. Let me tell you also why ratings and review itself is a rich but not sufficient data source in my mind. So first of all, let's start. Why has everybody focused on ratings and reviews? And you probably know that, but the level of feedback you get is very precise, right? It is SKU level feedback. We know exactly which product was in focus when somebody writes a review. And even more important is we also know this person truly bought the product, right? Or always over 90% of all reviews on Amazon are verified purchases. Other retailers have similarly high percentages. So it's a true user of your product. And it gives this very specific post-purchase experience, right? When are people writing reviews? Probably between a day and a week after they have received their product. And it's especially this out of the box experience or the first impression they will comment on. Now, the good thing is ratings and reviews are available as free data. So that means also you can look at your competitor data. So it is really insightful if you have a head-on-head competitor to understand how is their brand sentiment tracking. So you can look at that on the retailer page. Now
So
let's
you're pulling that all when you talk about competitor data from that standpoint. Um, are you looking for, hey, what are the complaints? What are the things they like? Like how else are you pulling that in? Is it just a web scrape, like a typical web scrape?
So yeah, what we do at Yogi, we do scrape all ratings and reviews of the products and brands our clients want to have and want to monitor. And what we're looking at is, first of all, overall brand sentiment, but then product specific details. But often becomes very interesting when it comes to competitor is to understand white space. So let me give you an example. Which flavor does a competitor have that consumers really like that I don't have, right? Which noise cancellation feature is really getting a lot of positive sentiment that we might not be offering?
So is it, in your opinion now, is it table stakes to be doing that as long as you're monitoring ratings and reviews of your own products? Is that where you're at now?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely your own ratings and reviews, right? You don't want to be blindsided. You want to understand, but also competitors. Um, it is so easy, right? It is out there and for you to take, and you don't want to be surprised by a competitor product suddenly um, taking off, and you have no idea why, what people like about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it.
Great. So let's talk about consumer care data. Now, this is your own data. So here, the point we had right now about competitor data is not an option, right? It is your own proprietary data. If you give us your consumer care data, we'll analyze it for you, but not, of course, we're not sharing competitive data. Now, what is interesting though and unique about this data set that it is often very highly motivated and loyal customers. So when they call, they will tell you often what's going on, where they bought the product, what happened to it, what they were intended to use it. And sometimes that is almost like a mini focus group into really understanding usage, especially if you look at many calls at the same time. Often also people bring up issues, maybe sensitive topics or open questions that they wouldn't have otherwise asked. So for example, we saw with one company, there were a bunch of questions about the ingredients if something was animal derived, right? You wouldn't know that because people wouldn't ask that on ratings and review, or especially if you think about sensitive topic, nobody would, or not many people put it in a public forum. But it is an important question that potentially could keep them even from purchasing that product again. So it's a slightly different, much more in-depth viewpoint on the consumer and how they're using your product.
So really quick, the question comes in, is this real-time data feedback then? So I guess in my opinion, are you going to automatically be flagged if all of a sudden you've launched a new product, maybe it is in a sensitive area, and all of a sudden you've got 15 calls that come in? Is this flagging it immediately like we have an anomaly?
So what we do in Yogi, exactly, we do have alerts set up. So you can pick certain keywords or certain topics that might be an issue. And especially what you're describing right now, the monitoring of new products is often very interesting, right? You want to know quickly, do people like it, right? Is something going on? We also do have a few customers, especially for anything that you put in your body, who have set up alerts on any sort of allergic reaction or maybe mold or something. So I call it the crisis management. So when you want to know, like one is enough for you already to pay attention, we have that part, but we also do have that. Oh, people seem to not like that new flavor as much as I wanted. So you want to really stay close in the first week of the product launch and understand the reception of the audience to your product.
Love it. Awesome. Yeah. And others, keep dropping questions in the chat and the Q&A and we'll get to them.
Great. All right. Now let's talk about social media. Also a interesting and rich source of consumer feedback. Now here it is real time and often unfiltered, right? It's a cross brand. Sometimes you even don't exactly know what brand has been talked about or what product. What is really interesting about social media is that you often see what I call the pre-purchase decision. When somebody doesn't yet know which headphone they want to buy, right? And they're describing their unique case of like, I want to use it for woodworking where the surrounding, the noise is slightly different. What should I buy, right? So you see these threads that are actually discussing a pre-purchase experience. You wouldn't see them on any of the other I just described, right? Because they're only your existing customers would buy it. So that can be a really interesting source to understand you. Why are people choosing certain brands or products compared to others? Also, social media, similar to ratings and reviews, will allow for competitive insight, right? Often your social listening provider will include your own brand as well as competitor brands if you have set it up accordingly. So they can be interesting to understand how your brand is stacking up against others. Also, what's interesting about social media is these emerging trends and cultural relevance. So you might see something coming despite that there not no product out there yet addressing that. What I mentioned earlier, the vegetable in shampoo is a trend, right? You might hear early rumblings on social media already been discussed.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right, and here the last data source, the proprietary, the existing research data. And again, it is what we're discussing here is not the first reason why you decided to set out a Qualtrics or a survey, but it's often what we realize there's this text field, right, where people put in their what they really liked about the experience or a show or your product, and it's often too difficult to analyze. So we take those unstructured feedback and put it together with the other feedback we received. What is the real advantage about this proprietary research? It's a defined audience. You often spoken exactly to the personas you want to talk with. You know a lot about each individual respondents and can tailor that back. And you can do deeper comparison and benchmarking, especially on you can test different flavors or different scents and things like that.
Yeah, a question comes down. How about return reasons?
Yeah, very good question. We started to analyze those as well. Like often for some, they're many brands have like 5 reasons, and it essentially becomes a quantitative analysis. But for those who actually have more open field, this can become really interesting. And yes, we analyze those as well. You want to see if there's any sort of trend spiking. Sometimes there's also interesting difference by geography. You might have a different primary return lease in one country versus another. The more unstructured the data, the richer are the insights, but also the harder it is to aggregate.
No, I mean it's an interesting point, right? Because
Mhm.
in the interest in the past of simplifying it, right, you just have the radio buttons for them to click and then you have them move on. I think as we move into a time of like AI and it being able to, and machine learning, being able to crunch the data, like you're saying, actually it's more unstructured the better. Give them an open, a free text place to just type in what's wrong. And on the back end, you as a company can use a tool to actually crunch it and figure out what's going on. And then you probably get better responses, more accurate, and then can adapt either product changes, packaging changes, whatever it might be.
Yeah, you're spot on exactly, right? Especially the loyal client who is willing to provide more detail on why the fit wasn't there, right? Why the noise cancellation wasn't as good as expected. And if you give them an outlet, right, it is your feedback to take.
Yeah, just the comment here, bizarre voice questions and answers type. Um,
Are those a product related one? So common question, FAQs about a product. Those we have analyzed as well. Yeah. As if they're easily available, they can be an interesting source in this case often. The interesting piece is the question and not the answer, right? Which often goes to the what are these open questions consumers have? What I touched on in the consumer care part, like may it be about a typical usage, right? Can I give this vitamin to my 9-year-old? Things like that. So the question often becomes the more interesting piece than the answer. Yeah.
yeah, I also think just from a personal standpoint as a consumer, I hate it when I get to the FAQs and they're just randomly generated FAQs because
Mhm.
everybody should have an FAQ section.
Mhm.
So I can see the instance where you're taking this data to actually find out what are the most commonly asked questions to then create that on the direct to consumer site or wherever. Like, hey, these are actually the top frequently asked questions rather than just, hey, I'm going to do a filler.
Exactly. And maybe even better, address that question more head on, right? Because to some extent, you might have lost people already if they go to the FAQ. But if you put it in your PDP, for example, right away, say, good for children, right? You might actually have won a consumer earlier.
Yeah, easy open closure, whatever it might be. How
Yeah,
hard is it to
exactly.
open? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome. All right. So I talked about all of the uniqueness of each data source. But let's, on the flip side, they also all have their limitations. And I think it is important to be aware of. And we're at Yogi, we're so familiar with the ratings and reviews. It is interesting when you look at the distribution. In general, on average, about 50% of all ratings are 5 stars. Everything is great, right? And then about 20 to 30% is all 1 star. There's not much in the middle. That is not a real reflection of your consumers, right? It's more that the people who write a review are the ones who are like really fans or have something to complain about. So that's just something to be aware of, that this is a very skewed area and generally more skewed towards the positive, but that probably depends on brand. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you have no insights into the pre-purchase decision. So the only people who write reviews are the one who bought your product, not the one who decided last minute to go with a competitor product. So you will never know why, right? And also in general, all of the reviews are limited to online purchases. It is rare that a consumer goes into the Walmart physical store, buys something, and then leaves an online review later. So you have a blind spot when it comes to these brick and mortar purchases. We have a similar but different story for consumer care. And we like to joke, we often call it the complainer channel. Now, of course, right, if somebody picks up the phone to call a consumer care line, something is not going with the product as wanted. So you often see super negative sentiment on the call, complaining. A great agent is able to turn that around, is turn any consumer into a happy consumer. But generally, you see it's a much more negative channel than any others. It's almost you need to baseline yourself there versus comparing it to ratings and reviews. Hand in hand with that goes, it is not reflecting the general sentiment, but is a very good indicator for issues. And as we talked earlier, consumer care doesn't allow for competitive data, so you're kind of benchmarking yourself against your own. Yeah. Now, when we talk about social media, right? Also here the bias is it can be influencer marketing. There's a risk of bots. It's probably even growing right now. Viral trends can maybe distort the true insight. So figuring out what is a signal versus a noise is really important with social data. Also, it is a really high volume and a good amount is irrelevant. With social data, our advice is to clients, give us as much as you can, and we'll probably throw away 70% or more because it's irrelevant, but the remaining 30% can be insightful. So, or to say the signal to noise ratio for social can be really off. That is why actually volume is helping. The problem with social media often is we don't like it's hard to know which product is discussed. So somebody might talk about a brand, a vitamin brand, and it's not exactly know which product. It might be something mentioned, but it's unclear if it's the correct name. So you often get more insights on the brand level than truly on a product specific one. And then proprietary research data. The limitation is it's generated in an artificial environment, right? And people might say something that might actually not be true later on when they're doing their shopping and actually act different than what they said they would act. Also, it's often not really spontaneous reaction. It's curated in the audience and the question is limited, whatever you asked. So all to say, in summary, each of those data sets has their very unique strength, right? But also is isolated in itself. None is really the true story or the full picture. And so what we realized, the moment you bring together the insights from all the various channels, that is when you can start to create this holistic picture of understanding what your consumers are really saying about your brand and your product.
You're really good. So a quick question comes around overreacting to isolated signals without context. So I'm thinking from they're meaning from the issue of social media monitoring as a whole.
Hmm.
Eh, How are you isolating that where you're not overreacting to something that may or may not be there? Because I
Yeah,
think for a while there, that was something that truly happened is everybody was hyper focused or hypersensitive on any negative feedback
right. Yeah.
and jumping on top of it rather than just letting it play out.
Yeah. So what we often find is most powerful is simply grounding it in data and putting it in context. So that means, for example, if on social media a a blog or a comment is coming up about the dog food I bought had mold all over, right? And then maybe this gets a lot of reactions. You can actually simply look, let's say, in the last 2,000 comments you ingested from social media, how many mention the word mold? If it was only this one mention, right? And despite that it got a lot of reaction, maybe that person had lots of followers, you can say, this was one out of 2,000 comments, and we can't find the mention of mold anywhere else. This seems to be a one-off story versus really a systematic issue. On the other side, right, if the outcome would be you then look up how often has the word mold come up, and you see it's actually increasing in volume, you might then know that there's a real issue going on. And sometimes what we can see, it is actually, if it's an issue coming up, we had that there was glass in pizza, right? Because of the factory and how it was produced. It was very clear it started in September, and then for 4 weeks, you saw that mentioned more often than ever before. So grounding it in data and having a good understanding of baseline, right, is 0.5% of mentions enough for you to get your alert? In certain cases, it might. So knowing how often it is compared to any other mentions helps to know what is a signal and what is just noise.
So are you seeing it getting pulled into um like the social media planning and development?
No, we are mostly consuming directly from social listening companies, right? Now, it doesn't take much, honestly, on the other side to use the insights you have here to turn that again into social media content, right? But that is more of a, I think I would say it's coming full circle. So, for example, we do have clients who use us to figure out what is a really good consumer quote that I should use on my social media, and this is the message I want to drive. So that is definitely possible. But I would say it goes from your social media platform into Yogi for the analysis and then back into your campaign.
All right. So I guess maybe even just guiding strategy as a whole. Do we
Exactly.
react to this or do we not? Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Or
Awesome.
also knowing, for example, which themes are the themes that consumers are talking about. What are, and I'll come to a case study in a moment, but you will see their emphasis might be very much different than your brand's emphasis, right? And then closing that disconnect here.
So I have 30 more questions, but let's keep rolling
All
because
right.
I'm thinking from the standpoint of how many different groups within an organization this hits from the customer
Yep.
service, right, to the social media, to the marketing, to product development, new product launch.
Yep. You nailed it. E-commerce, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Brand managers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I promise you, I'll come with real case studies. So let's talk about real case studies now. That you see that this is not just like nice to have theoretical insights. So here it was a vitamin provider, melting gummies. And interestingly, as we talked earlier, right, ratings and review is more established. Our client here saw this melting issue when it comes in the summer. Every summer, you would see there was a spike in the term melting that would start in June and end in August. And it was clearly, you could see it 3 years in a row. And so the assumption was, okay, somebody's ordering vitamins, they've been put in front of the door, they sit in the sun until somebody comes home and they're melting. Then we started to analyze, in this case, it was Zendesk data, and realized that the same melting issue is coming up. But when you start to look into some of the chats specifically, and you have the example here on the slide, it said, I bought them from the store this time and they were all fused together. So what the insight revealed that this melting issue was not what I would call a last mile issue. This must have happened way early in the supply chain. So in order to address it, it's not just like a little better packaging from Amazon to your door. No, something must have happened earlier that caused the gummy to melt. So the company took that feedback serious. Actually, in this case, adjusted, worked on the formulation so this wouldn't happen, and resulted in a great turnaround this issue. Still, you can still see a seasonality spike, but way less intense than before.
I mean, this was me when I was at Perigo with melting gummy vitamins. This was
Okay,
exactly
yeah.
it. And what I love is, I mean, there's one thing, right? You're either going to go fix and say, hey, we're not going to ship, or I'm going to go to Amazon or wherever and say, hey, you need more climate controlled, which they're not necessarily going to do. They'll do climate monitor, but not climate controlled. But at the end of the day, you have to push it back to a formulation issue.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So you're short circuiting, you're right. You're taking the shortcut to the actual problem resolution. I love it.
Exactly, yeah. Or in this case, right, just understanding the more complete picture and knowing this was a bigger issue, right? And therefore you need to address it earlier. Yeah. Yeah.
So awesome.
Um, Here's another case study. In this case, it is Tylenol I'm allowed to share. So there were complaints about the format, and that has not been new. People not exactly knowing how to consume it, instruction not exactly clear, just general confusion. What was interesting, and in this case, was actually ratings and reviews, because what I mentioned earlier, with ratings and reviews, you can draw insights to the SKU level. So you know exactly where the issues coming up. It was clear that there was a newly launched product with a new format that caused a lot of confusion. People just didn't know how to consume it. And it was so precisely tied to this one product that the team could address it. And in this case, they actually updated the packaging, the information on the package, as well as the PDP, making very clear of how to consume it. And that, in this case, was actually quite a quick fix, right? It was only the packaging, only the messaging, and resulted in a noticeable increase. First of all, in organic store rating, and then actually down the road in conversion rate and sales overall. All right.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I lived in the CBG space, so I know this really well. Yeah, people were trying
Yeah.
to drop it in water rather than just putting it directly on their tongue.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And then it not being effective, right? And here's your complaint. Yep. All right, I have two more, so this is one from an App Store review. So in this case, there was complaints about the speaker. Actually, it started on overall rating and reviews, were I think over a 4 point something, and then started to drop. Also, sentiment started to drop, and it was unclear what was happening because the product itself hadn't changed. Well, then we took a deeper look in the App Store feedback, which in this case, so the speaker had an app associated with it. And there was this clear spike in negative sentiment happening around um, um, user experience and then specifically around the UI. And that the moment the negative feedback started was exactly tied to a software update or a version update for the app, which it was one of those trends where apps became very minimal, right? The UI became like sleek, almost no contrast, right? Careful colors. But it was so minimal that it actually led to confusions. So consumers wouldn't find the button anymore to turn the volume up and down, right? Which caused confusion and therefore frustration. And that actually all the way to the overall rating and review in this case, resulting in negative sentiment. Now, in this case, and it's probably why I work at Yogi, I like software because you can change it really fast, right? With the next version update, right, you could fix it. It's software fixes are so easy to address, right? In this case, with the next software update, they improved the UI, increased contrast again, focused on usability, and the issue was gone. Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at this, is there any way to really, I think of it as like reviews 1.0, and now we're either at 2.0 or 3.0, maybe
Mhm.
2.5,
Mhm.
where it is the complete aggregation across all of these channels that you've laid out. We can't leave it just to a single ratings reviews platform that's analyzing sentiment on Amazon and maybe Walmart as well. Um, how have you seen all of that come together? And then, and maybe we're going to get to this, I don't know. As I was thinking about all those different, how do you unify, basically the thought and the decision making, because this touches so many different parts of an organization as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that very good question. I think the first task is to first of all to put it all together, right? To not try to have the feedback from consumer care live somewhere over there that's only been analyzed by the CX leader, right? And then a brand manager is the only one who's looking at ratings and review. I think that is leading to the isolated picture, right? I think first of all you need to have it all in one place, and ideally first of all use the same terminology, right? What do we mean by positive and negative sentiment? What do we mean when we say taste and flavor, right? So using the same terminology or the same taxonomy helps to understand and truly also compare apples to apples. And then we do believe that any relevant this data should be available, democratized across the organization because different people will draw different insights, right? Product innovation will probably look for white space, right? Or is a product specific feedback. Brand managers might look at messaging, right? Or also competitors' positioning. So I think the more you have a solution that allows each of the group to get to the insight they want, the more insights or the more tailored insights you can extract.
Yeah, are you finding like when you're going into a new organization that you're doing a lot of like not only training, obviously, on how to use it and what to look for, but just education as a whole of what you're able to do? I'm thinking of an example where if I'm on the brand team and marketing, I'm looking at the ratings reviews on marketplaces and saying everybody loves the cherry flavor,
Mhm.
where I've got a new market research team that's looking at the competition piece and saying, hey, like you're saying, the white space is, yeah, everybody loves cherry. And so the next 5 products we launch should be cherry. But by the way, everybody else loves grape of our competitors. In that there's a whole product development team. E-commerce space, people are more open to trying this stuff and they're always looking for it. But when you're talking about traditional parts of the company, it seems like there's a lot of education about the new tools that are out there. Or are you seeing just a rapid like uptake and adoption of it?
To be honest, we see both, right? We have clients who have standardized insight creation, who are putting insights from our tools into their, into their weekly meetings, and they all look at the same data and therefore all come to the same conclusion. But we also have, companies where the tool is out there for anybody to use and everybody kind of draws their own insight. I think it depends a bit on the type of company. Generally, and this is probably where AI is really an accelerator, our aspiration is to make our platform as user-friendly as possible so anybody can get to the insight as quickly as possible, that there is no extensive training anymore. Yeah, you do have the ability to set up custom dashboards and share it and like make sure everybody looks at the same data. But we, of course, also allow just for, voice input so you get the data out you want. What is really important is that it's all grounded in data, right? That we all use the same underlying data and that can always be shared. So the conclusion you're driving will be the same.
Yeah, so a question here, what's the difference between enterprise AI tools like this and what you can learn from Chat GPT?
hmm So we have sometimes we come across in sales conversation, somebody says, I just took all of our ratings and copied them in GPT and came to the same and found this issue.
Yes.
Great.
It's common practice now, right?
Exactly. I think this works well if you're looking for a one-time high-level insight of issues, complaints, right? But I think if you're looking for repeatable, reliable insights where there's also no work needed. So first of all, how did you get to all the reviews from Amazon, right? You probably may have gone into 10 pages, copy pasted in, right? Sounds painful. Like a company like Yogi does that for you. Every week we scrape the data from all the hundreds and thousands of products you told us and we analyze them right away. There's a lot of nuances in there, such as some reviews are syndicated, so they show up on Walmart and Walgreens, and you might count them double. Do you want to, or do you actually want to deduplicate? There's things such as promotional reviews, right? Somebody got a a new energy drink for free and they write a review. It's a very positive review. I'm not saying you should not include that in your analysis, but you might want to know which ones are promotional. So we, for example, allow the ability to filter it out so you see the real feedback, but you can also leave it in, things like that. And then the thing with GPT, so you copied your 100 reviews and there's that summary. And then you do that again, and you know what happens when you do it the second time around? The answers will probably be slightly different, right? Like no longer taste and flavor will be the top issue, but product effectiveness. That will not happen in a solution where truly every mention is associated with a sentiment and a theme, and that is not changing. So that the next day you come in, you'll get the same answer because our responsibility is to allow brands to make decisions that last, right? That are grounded in data. And then I think the alerting capability and dashboard capabilities, those are not there yet, or don't know if they ever will be on chatbot, so on GPT. I think, as I mentioned, it's great for a quick analysis, but if you need reliable data and need to make sure that everybody in your organization looks at the same, I'd go with an enterprise AI solution.
How high up does the reporting that come out go? Because I
Uh,
can see the other side of it is a brand owner, I'm trying to constantly justify decisions that I'm making, either for marketing, maybe it's paid search, social, whatever it might be. Like, do you see this making it to the C-suite where reporting goes out to say, hey, it's either one, I need to get budget approved, or two, a lot of people are getting their feet held to the fire for everything that they spent the past year, like whether or not it worked and what happened.
Yeah, we definitely do. And here I'll share a quick personal anecdote that I'm allowed to share. So prior to Yogi, I was at Amazon, and Amazon is famous. I think the internet talks about it, the famous Jeff Bezos email. So if a customer writes Jeff Bezos with something not working, right, he'll take that email and he sent it down simply with a question mark. And yes, I have received those emails, right? Like a customer complaining about the wait and the on the helpline was too long. Um, And in a situation like this, you will address the issue that has come up. But you, to what we discussed earlier, you don't know at this point if was that one customer that just accidentally made it to Jeff Bezos, or is that a real issue? And that is what we have seen. That is very powerful for our clients. So this issue is coming up. Often it is the CEO who's bringing it, and then people look in the software and come back and say, "Hey, this is actually is a one-off case. We have looked at it in the last 2 years. There's not a single other mention of this happening." And those are the cases where we then hear, for example, very famously that a solution like ours makes it all the way up to the C-suite. But we also do have others who use it in their regular reporting. Especially there's this continuous trend about everybody in the organization being connected to what's called the voice of the customer. So don't hide behind abstract metrics and high-level strategy, but truly understand what your consumers are saying. So this drive for seeing and reading verbatims to be connected to consumer is a trend we hear more and more. And that is why we see also in executive reporting that certain reviews and ratings or other customer feedback from extracted from a solution like ours are being promoted to expose executives to the voice of the consumer.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can hit so many different parts of it from quality control, customer service,
Mhm.
product design, development, R&D, obviously sales, marketing. So is it usually open to the entire organization for them to jump in and play around with?
So our model is that our seats are unlimited. It depend. We see different models, right? In some companies, we see that there's a strong insights team who is mostly driving a solution like ours, and then sharing insights with the relevant teams because they also know who is responsible for what. We see other more like single brand companies where the tool is available to anybody. In fact, people are encouraged to find their voice of the consumer for their particular need.
It's awesome. Others, you have questions, keep dropping the chat or the Q&A and we'll get to them. Yeah, I didn't know how many like slides. I didn't mean to just jump in and totally
No, no, it's
derail the
great.
presentation. No.
I have one more case study, and then see if that sparks any other questions. And then we'll take it from here. So this is, I wanted to share this one because you asked me earlier about, what you as a brand think is important versus what your consumers are saying. So in this case, it was actually for consumer electronic. It was an influencer or looking at influencer videos at scale, right? And you can transcribe those videos and you can see where the emphasis is. And in this case, the product the really featured around connectivity, right? The influencer talked how amazing the device was in connecting with all the different other devices. But then when you analyze the comments, that was actually not what consumers care about. They didn't talk about connectivity. They just talked about the battery life in a very positive sentiment. But what this indicated is that what the influencer and therefore the brand thought was the most important, feature of this new product was not actually what consumers picked up. And especially we see that those types of videos are particularly relevant for new features, for new product, especially in the first weeks. You see the spike of like videos coming out and people reacting to that. And that's exactly where you can then fine tune your message, right? Is what we believe is the feature we should emphasize, also the feature really that consumers care. And if there's a disconnect, right, how can you bring that together? That what you think this new product stands out for is also what consumers are seeing.
Awesome. Love it.
So.
Others, if you have questions, drop them in the chat or the Q&A as we kind of get to the end here. More than happy to work those in. Like, from your standpoint, like fundamentally, so you've been at Amazon, you've been at McKinsey, and you look at the, Yogi and where it's going, like what excites you about the platform and what surprised you the most?
Mhm. So I think what surprised me was to understand sometimes how hard it is for a brand to truly understand, their customer, so the consumer, right? Because there's a retailer in between. So really understanding what, people think and feel and desire about your product is hard, right? At the same time, then there's also so much guessing going on. How do you know that this new product you're launching right now will be a hit or not? And so for me, I find it quite exciting to close that gap, right? To develop to use technology, to use AI, to use the data available to be more spot on so that more of the products we all launch resonate with the consumers who are out there ready to consume it. So if we can lower this 85% of consumers of products that have been launched and not on the shelf 2 years later, if we can lower that to 30%, I think this is a win for everybody. It is for the brand, of course, right? Because you're saving resources and energy, and it's also for the consumer, right? I think that I hope a solution like Yogi can allow us to do. So bringing brands and consumers closer together.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's interesting as technology, the amount of data we have was growing at such a rate. There weren't enough tools out there to gather it all. And the AI and machine learning wasn't there to do it fast enough where we could
Mhm.
actually, trust what it was saying. Like a lot of it was the mechanical Turk, right? It just goes overseas
Yep.
overnight and hands on keyboard, comes back in the morning, you have answers. But it wasn't cost efficient, time efficient, and the answers were questioned. And I guess what's exciting for me is like tools like this just coming from the brand side. And a lot of what you talked about was in the CPG and the pharma spaces, which is where I sat. We needed to know immediately
Yeah.
on, for other reasons than, hey, does a customer like it or not? But from, hey, by the way, this is making somebody sick. The fact
Yeah.
there's a tool out there that's looking beyond just ratings reviews, which are completely reactionary, but also that pre-purchase part, I think it's awesome. I think
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I think that what we learned, the more powerful the AI around us, the deeper of the insights you can get, right? We still have many clients when we start partnering with them who tell us that they have a person who read ratings and review and then put it in Excel, right? Um, but if you go it this way, you can't extract the nuances that sometimes is in text, right? I think they're powerful. There was a cookie company who did a slight reformulation on their recipe that happens quite often. And it was probably barely noticeable, but it was enough that if you look at thousands of reviews, you see the slight dip in sentiment when it comes about sugar content, right? So suddenly with a tool like that, you can actually get to nuances that really help you in this case to say, this reformulation, let's just roll it back, right? And it was a small amount, but because you have so much data, you can see such small changes already. Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. So scan QR code for a quick survey,
Yeah.
insights. Awesome.
Yeah, we're happy to, if you qualify for it, happy to share free insights from some of the public data we have. So scan the QR code you see here, take a quick survey, and if you qualify, we'll send you free insights that are hopefully relevant to your brand, or they will be relevant to your brand if you have them, and products as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. I mean, for your time today. I don't have any other questions that have come in the chat or the Q&A. But I mean, you guys are great friends, partners, supporters of the network, and tons of people in it. For the people on the line, I encourage you to have a follow-up conversation with Yogi and the team over there. They're all around fantastic people, driven to help you succeed as well. And they're doing some really, really awesome things. And so that look for email from me as well. I'd love to have a conversation with you. We don't sell anything here at BWG Connect, but I'd love to pick your brain on other topics, things that you thought about this webinar, other topics that we might have, and if there's any upcoming events, let you know about them and give you an invite. So, Heike, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah,
Thanks
great
to Yogi.
conversation. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we're going to wrap up this webinar here. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions. Take care, stay safe, and look forward to having you at a future event. Thanks, my friends. We'll see you. Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye.